you can go to right click, find macro, select your macro and select, or type it, control enter. Now, there's a lot of different things that you can do with your macro. If you want to, if you're typing out the same thing over and over again, if you want to create lists. So we just go into our find macro, click on our macro. Now, if you've ever done a clickable list, or if you've never done a clickable list, sorry, you create them with the square brackets. They turn blue because we've got our beginning and our end bracket. But to create a list, we do our square bracket. So say we have a list of symptoms. So headache, vomiting, breathing, sure. And then we just want to close it off with a square bracket. So in between, what I did was I put in a bar. That is located above your enter key with the backslash. You just have to hold your shift and the little pipe. So once you have that, we have this in our macro. We just want to hit select to save. We want to hit update to save. So I'm just going to do that again. So headache, pipe, vomiting, pipe, and breathing. Helps if I spell correctly. And then we want to finish it off with the other square bracket. So update, then select. Again, select pulls in our macro. Now we have a clickable list that's included in our macro. So say, patients coming in, they're not feeling well, you type the same thing every time a patient comes in for the beginning of the appointment. You want to select the different options. You can just check headache, check breathing, and then double click. Accuro will insert the punctuation and make it grammatically correct. And you have your clickable note in your macro. So again, if we type macro, control enter, that will also bring in the clickable list as well. Another thing that you can do is you can add in patient information. So you can set your macro to pull in information. So again, we're just going to open up our macro here. If we right click in the blank area, you have this list of information that you can pull in. So say patient, and then we want their name to pull in. We would go right click, go to patients, first name, space, patient, last name, is here for a checkup. And say we want to have today's date brought in, we would right click and we can go to current date. Now we just want to save it, update, and we'll close it because we're just going to type in macro and our enter. And there we have where it's pulling in the information. So you can have your macro pull in this information as needed as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with macros. Lots of saving, they're just a way to make things go quicker. You can also add in, you can also copy and paste. Now, sometimes copy and paste doesn't always work well with Accuro. Sometimes it does. So if you have a big letter that you want to be able to send out, you can copy and paste from, say, Word or Notepad or wherever the document is and try to copy and paste it into a letter using Control C to copy and Control V to paste. That way you can have a macro for that as well. Now there is a maximum. You can only have 4,000 characters in a macro. So if anything exceeds that, you would probably have to create a second macro to use with the first one. And again, just make sure you name it something that is relevant. Now say you have someone in your office that is really jealous of the amazing macro that you have. Well, you have the option to share with another user. So to do that, we just need to, I'm going to close this one. So if you have one that you want to save, you would go into the note. Again, I'm just going into the note one because it's blank and there's no other information in there. I want to put my macro down. So I'm going to hit select, and then I'm going to save it in this note. So if you have someone who wants your macro, or you want to be able to share your macro with someone else, I would just say, hey, it's in a test patient. So you can use any of our BCFHT patients to put the note into, just so that it's not in a live active patient. Tell them what day the note is. So, hey, it's in on September 25th. It's in as a note. You can go in there and make your macro. So now I just want to open the note, which double clicking or right click and open. If I highlight the note and right click, I have this option to save as a macro. So I hit save, and now I just have to give it a name. So I'm going to name it macro 2 because I already have macro, and then OK. So now when I do macro 2, control enter, it'll bring in that same macro. Now, the only issue when you're copying someone else's macro is, as you can see here, it says patient IT BCFHT is here for a checkup on September 25th. It's no longer bringing in information, it's bringing in what was saved in that chart. So if that happens where you're saving a macro that already has information being pulled in from the patient's chart, you can just erase that. Go to details, current date, erase this, and you can just go in and clean up and add the patient information, or if there's anything else in the chart that was meant to brought in, and just because you copy and paste it, it's copying, pasting the first name, last name of the patient that the note was originally created on. So you just have to go through, clean it up a bit. But as you can see here, because we have our clickable list, we've got our square brackets and the pipes, that information is just going to stay the same. So I've updated this, so I just want to hit update, and now I can hit select, and it'll bring in the information as needed. And if we go back into our macro, it's got the patient, first name, patient, last name to bring in. So that's a really fun thing about macros. So again, if you know someone who has a great macro and you want to kind of be able to share, and you want to be able to get it for yourself as well, this is the #1 way to do it. So just get them to save it to a test patient, save it as a note. You can use any other letter encounter note as you'd like. It's just I like the note one because it's very generic and there's no other information being brought in. So now that we have our test macro created, and we've kind of gone over how we can share it, there is a way we can use macros in other areas rather than just encounter notes. So I'm just going to close this. And one of the areas that we can use it is actually in tasks and forms. So if I'm going to go to F7. I'm going to go to new task, under myself, under the test patient. So if I go into here and I type macro 2, control enter, it's going to bring in this information. Now, as you can see here, the square brackets and the pipe brackets or pipelines are not blue. So unfortunately, in tasks and in forms, the clickable lists don't work. So you would just have to remove information if it has a clickable list, whatever you would like applied and whatever is not necessary. Also, to add in the macro, you don't have to do the control enter. I just find that a bit faster. You can right click, go to find macro, go to your macro, select, and you can bring it in that way. So that's one way. And then just send your task off as needed. So I'm just going to close this down when it wants to close for me. And I'm just going to go into a note or a form. So I'm going to find a form that has an area where we can type in. So I'm just in this CAMH one here. And right here, there's an area where to type in. So if you, again, reason for referral, maybe you're typing in the same sentence every single time. The reason for this referral is because blah, 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 blah. You can, again, add your macro. So name, Control Enter, and it'll pull in your macro. And again, as you can see here, it's not going to bring in the clickable list. So you would just have to remove anything you don't need. And again, because we have it set to pull in the patient's first name and last name and the date, it's going to pull that in as well. So maybe for reason for referral, you want, let's just see, we're going to go back into our note for a second here. So maybe you're doing lots of reason for referrals. You want to be able to add in that extra information. We're going to go into our macro and we're just going to enter. You can add in information from the patient's medical history. So maybe reason for referral, you want to be able to put in the history of problems. So, we'll do history of problems. Let's create a new macro for this. So we're going to create one called form. Form reason. Yes, we want to say the changes. So for this one, we're going to pull in the history. History of problems. We're going to update and we're going to select it. So now it's going to pull in that information. So it is marked as a clickable list. So it does work in the form here. We don't need to save the changes to that. So now if we go into our CAMH referral and we go to form reason, Control Enter. Okay. So it looks like the reason might just have too much information and won't pull in. So I don't think lab information can pull into the forms. Oh, we learned something new today. That's why. So you can't, in forms and tasks, you can't have it pull in the medical history band. So unfortunately, we can't create a form to pull, or a macro to pull in medical history band when we're using tasks and when we're using forms. It does, however, continue to work in the encounter notes section. So that is the end of learning about macros. If anybody has any questions, you can email the IT department and we can answer them, unless anybody has any questions now that they'd like to get out and see. And I don't see any, so thank you so much for joining, and hopefully it was informative. Have a wonderful day. Thanks.